For years, a silent artery has been pumping critical minerals from the rugged rocks of Ontario to the assembly lines of Detroit. That artery is nickel, and its heart beats in Canada's Sudbury Basin. This isn't just any metal. Nickel is a core ingredient in the batteries that power electric vehicles, especially the high-performance ones being built by companies like GM and Stellantis. Sudbury's mines, Coppercliff, Garson, Coleman, dig up hundreds of thousands of tons of nickel-copper ore each year. When refined, that ore becomes battery-grade material, traveling across the border and straight into the heart of America's electric vehicle revolution. This flow has been smooth, stable, and almost invisible. No one paid much attention, until now. In July, the Trump administration announced a sweeping 30% tariff on imported electric vehicles. What caught everyone off guard? There was no exemption for Canadian nickel, even though it's been part of the U.S. supply chain for decades. Canada didn't sit quietly after the tariff announcement. Within days, Ottawa rolled out a four-part counter-strategy, what industry insiders have started calling the nickel card. This isn't just about defending Canadian mining. It's a deliberate attempt to shift the pressure back onto the United States and make Washington rethink its position. First, Canada proposed a 15% export tax on nickel concentrate. That's the raw form of nickel that U.S. cathode manufacturers depend on. If Canada slaps a tax on it, American companies will suddenly face higher costs for materials they've long imported cheaply. Second, Ottawa wants to enforce carbon tracking for all nickel exports. Why? Because Ontario's nickel is some of the cleanest in the world. It's refined using hydroelectric power and electrolysis. If the United States still wants access to low-emission battery materials under climate goals, they'll have to accept Canada's terms. Otherwise, they'll be stuck with carbon-heavy imports from places like Indonesia and the Philippines. Third, Canada is investing $257 million in lithium iron phosphate, LFP, battery technology. This chemistry doesn't use nickel at all. By promoting LFP, Ottawa is signaling we don't need to be dependent on you either. Fourth, they're trying to keep big players like Stellantis in Canada by offering tax breaks for a 20-gigawatt battery factory near the U.S. border. If successful, Canada could become the go-to destination for clean battery production, while U.S. factories scramble for materials. Altogether, it's a smart, calculated move. Canada is saying, we control one of the cleanest, most reliable sources of nickel on the planet. If you want it, you'll have to play fair. Even before the dust could settle, the numbers started telling a story. The nickel trade was already shifting. In just the first half of 2025, Canadian nickel sulfate exports to the United States dropped by 5 percentage points. At the same time, exports to South Korea rose by 3 points, and Germany by 2. That might seem small, but in global supply chains, even a few percentage points can signal a major pivot. Here's the risk. If U.S. automakers can't rely on Ontario nickel, they'll have to turn to other sources, most likely Indonesia and the Philippines, where laterite nickel is processed using high-pressure acid leaching, or HPL. It's effective but dirty. HPL uses massive amounts of energy and emits a lot of carbon. Compared to Ontario's clean hydro-based process, the environmental footprint is off the charts. This shift has consequences. Not only does it undermine America's green goals, it sets up a regulatory boomerang. The European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, kicking in by 2026, will impose extra taxes on goods, like EVs, made with high-emission materials. So if U.S. automakers start building batteries with Indonesian nickel, their exports to Europe could face heavy carbon penalties. In other words, trying to protect the U.S. industry with tariffs could backfire by raising costs, cutting off clean supply, and triggering climate-based taxes abroad. And in that scenario, Canada becomes not the problem, but the solution America turned away from. The effects of the tariff aren't just theoretical, they're already hitting the ground in Detroit. Let's start with Stellantis. The company had ambitious plans for a new battery cell plant in Belvidere, Michigan, using a high-nickel, low-manganese design that depends heavily on Ontario's nickel. But with the 30% tariff looming and no guarantee of an exemption, the economics fell apart. In its September financial update, Stellantis announced an 11-month delay to the project timeline. That delay has consequences. Stellantis is now deciding whether to source cells from its Korean partner LGES to stay on schedule, or cut its 2027 Jeep Recon volume by 15%. Neither option is ideal. And both stem from the uncertainty around Canadian nickel. Over at General Motors, the numbers are just as grim. GM's EV platform, Ultium, relies heavily on nickel-rich cathodes. If the tariff stays, GM estimates a $1,250 cost increase per vehicle by 2026. Rather than jack up retail prices, the company plans to raise dealer destination fees by $650 and eat the rest out of its margins. But that comes at a price. Lower margins mean less money for battery R&D. GM expects its EBITDA to fall from 7.4% to 5.9%, translating to $2.1 billion less in free cash flow over 5 years. That's funding that would have gone to innovation, new factories, or cheaper EV models. So when you hear companies talk about project delays, reduced volumes, or cutting back on research, it's not fear-mongering. It's the very real result of a tariff reshaping the foundation of America's EV transition. Nickel isn't just a metal anymore. It's a symbol of economic leverage. The Sudbury Basin, once just another mining region, has become the center of a quiet but powerful standoff between two allies with very different strategies. For Canada, nickel is now a bargaining chip. For the United States, it's a strategic vulnerability. The numbers speak volumes. Ontario's nickel production is not only high grade, it's low carbon. According to the Nickel Institute, refining nickel in Ontario emits just 4.2 tons of CO2 per ton of metal. Compare that to 36 tons in Indonesia or 18 tons in China. That's not a small gap. That's the difference between passing or failing Europe's coming carbon border taxes. If the United States ignores Canada's offer and sticks with the tariff, it risks derailing its own climate credibility, raising vehicle costs, and handing the clean supply chain to Europe and South Korea. If Canada pulls its nickel, American automakers might still find nickel, but not without carbon baggage, logistical delays, and higher prices. Behind closed doors, Canadian officials are already making their position clear. Former central banker Mark Carney reportedly said, "Nickel and cobalt are our diamonds. We will not hesitate to play our tax card." That tells you everything. Canada is ready to use resource nationalism to protect its value and push back. There are now 3 outcomes on the table. First, the United States grants an exemption for Canadian battery content. Second, the tariff stays fully in place and Ottawa retaliates with export controls. Third, a partial compromise emerges, lowering the tariff and updating the Critical Minerals Alliance. Financial markets are betting on options 1 and 3. But if Washington miscalculates, the fallout could shape North America's EV future for a decade. In the end, Sudbury's nickel isn't just powering cars, it's powering negotiations. And whatever deal is reached, it'll be about more than ore. It'll be about who controls the map of tomorrow's green economy. So what do you think? Should Canada play hardball with the nickel card or meet the United States halfway? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay updated. Thanks for watching.